But what that taught me was it doesn't really matter what your status is. If you see something, if you have a role to play in it, don't cut yourself off from engaging it because you think, oh, it's not my place.
What does it feel like to align your actions with your values and to stay true to that, even when it isn't the easiest path forward? In my upcoming conversation with Darryl Spector, president of Promation, we explore that through a leadership approach grounded in integrity, accountability, and a strong moral compass. Darryl brings a clear perspective on what it means to show up for yourself, for others, and for the industry that you're a part of, to lead in a way that is consistently intentional and aligned with what you believe to be right. Join me as I split atoms with Darryl Spector.
So first and foremost, Darryl, thank you for being in the Splitting Atoms podcast studio. I've been looking forward to this conversation. I don't think we're going to get too far in, probably before there's some laughter. I don't think I've ever had a conversation without some sort of silliness with you coming through. But I also am really excited for it because there's so many great lessons that I know we're going to get to and our audience is going to hear from. So it'll be good all around. Before we jump into it, could you give me a high level, maybe 60-second overview of Promation?
Sure, yeah. Promation's been around since 95. Started off by, the founder in his basement, started off in automotive automation. I joined, we were just in automotive. Small company, 25 people, doing some really cool stuff. And then we got into nuclear with the refurb, which was amazing, but, great experience. And from there, we've really kind of expanded wide and deep. And I think what differentiates us, that's kept me there for this long, is it's a real entrepreneurial spirit, real ownership, accountability, type thing. And just it's kept it exciting. We really innovating and taking on a bit of risk, but also being able to kind of move the company around and adapt to the opportunities evolving.
And just for some of our listeners who may not know, when you say refurb, that is a refurbishment of a power plant. Because there's hopefully there's some people listening who are still learning about nuclear. We take our language a little bit for granted, but it's easy to slip it in there and someone's left thinking, what the heck is that? So,
yeah, fair enough.
So amazing. And your role at Promation?
Yeah, I'm president, run the company. Looking to try and grow it and take over the world type stuff, right? So
that's right, like Pinky and the Brain type of stuff.
A little bit. All in one, though.
Yeah, I was going to say you're Pinky and Brain.
Correct.
And so when I think of you and my experience with you, you have always been someone to me that not only carries himself well, has confidence, and shows up in a room with all of that good energy, but you have just shown up for me as someone who listens, cares, and remembers the people around you. I know maybe one of our earliest kind of connections or times when you reached out to me and we didn't just bump into each other at an event. You had learned that I like Disney. You're part of YPO, Young Professionals Organization, and they were having an event or a conference or something at Walt Disney World. And you remembered the fact that I love Disney for the building of it and the behind the scenes kind of how they build that brand up, not just the rides and the entertainment, which I also love. And you thought of that, remembered it, and then sent to me saying, hey, here's this really cool event, and it just made me think of you in such a thoughtful way because it was right up my alley and was so exciting to me. And that is a very big part of the identity that not only myself, I know a lot of people think of you in that way, that you are someone who shows up and considers others. And so has it always been like that for you? Is that something that you think has always been with you and shown up at the places you've been throughout your career?
I think generally, yes. I mean, it's maybe manifested in other ways, but I've got the benefit now of being a little more mature in my experiences and age over time, but, definitely had my impetuousness of youth and at times, and, I kind of went through an interesting arc through childhood through to young adulthood to kind of where I am now. And, I would say in my mid-20s, I definitely felt more, maybe less concerned of the well-being of people is a nice way of saying it.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's normal in your 20s. Do you think it would be fair to say early in career, before you were leading maybe or in an informal leadership role?
Right.
I mean, I guess it's really not a priority at that stage to think of others, to think of how you're impacting them, to really care about what's kind of going on with them.
Yeah.
And it's something you learn. And I know we've talked before, you've told me about a co-op placement, and that's a...
Yeah. So, one of my first internship co-op things in university, I was at GE. So there was, production, the GE lighting plants in Oakville, and there's probably about 15 or so co-ops, maybe in, company of 400 people or something. And, I had a lot of experience on the design side, so I knew what I was doing. I had, like, in some cases, more experience in some of the recent hires that GE had done on machine design, mechanical design, and so on. So there's a confidence from that. But there's also a cockiness and so on. And so, I was a bit of a dick, as young 20-something dudes can be. And I remember, like, one of the guys pissed me off. And I kind of like laid into him a bit. And he was a bit of a privileged only child. He was kind of like a little bit cocky, but not because it was like based on like he'd been through the scrum. He was like a bit protected and kind of said like, hey, you're a special child. So he believed he was a special child.
So it wasn't really based on competency.
I don't want to say that, but I mean, I think maybe it wasn't battle tested. Put it that way. So to me, that was a challenge. So I kind of put him in his place. He got really upset. And then I went to my buddy, Francois, who was a very like thoughtful, grounded guy. And I was like, I don't understand. He's like, yeah, but this is the issue is that, your problem is that you see people's weaknesses sometimes before they're willing to acknowledge themselves. And rather than just let it be, you pour vinegar on it before they're ready to see it. And that always stuck with me because it was an interesting perspective around it's not just about being perceptive or like trying to be observant of people. I've always been like a hyper curious person as a kid. And I think that curiosity kind of underlines everything. But I think what that moment, why I still remember it like 25 years later or whatever it is, this kind of awareness of just because you see something in somebody doesn't mean you can exploit it. And then this kind of thing around, there's a bit of a almost like moral obligation that insight and observations can be delicate things. And, for those that know me, I use a lot of analogies and I was saying to my son as well, it's like a sharp knife, right? If you don't, it's a very useful tool for certain things. It can help you with like, surgery or cutting things or whatever it is. But if you don't wield it properly, you can also cut yourself or harm others. And I think that's kind of what kind of cued me into this awareness. If it's not just about being aware or perceptive of people, but also the context of how you draw upon or leverage that as well.
Kind of that thought point of, do you use your self-awareness or your awareness of others to help or hinder them? Right? Because you can
even
use
more than
it.
hinder them. I mean, it could actually be destructive for
Yeah.
your own benefit, right? Like if you think of like at the extreme case, really good manipulators, and you wonder like how could somebody fall for this kind of stuff, and how could whatever. But if they use those powers for good, not for evil, think of how much more good they could do in that person's lives. But they exploit this differential in awareness and perception, plus this innate ability to see the faults or weaknesses. And rather than exploit them, if they helped to say, I'm going to create a safe, trusting space for you to explore these less resolved weaknesses in whatever. And by creating a safe space that allows you to kind of build that muscle and be a better person because of it, right? The underlying conditions are the same, but how you engage with it is fundamentally different. And I think what I've learned over the years, I'd rather be the person walking away with integrity and feeling good about the fact that we engaged this thing together and both came out with good things with it, than I got what I wanted. Sorry, your carcass is on the ground, but that's a you problem, not me. Because morally, that doesn't feel right. I mean, it doesn't resonate with my own values and character and so on. And I feel like a much better person at the end of the day, knowing that whatever engagement I had with that person, they're better off and grateful for it, and so am I. So it's more reciprocal.
And to take it one step further, are you someone who believes in karma? Because I think people like that who leave bodies as they climb, it comes back. Like it either they're not as respected, or later in life, no one's showing up for them because
I think word
they
just gets
climbed
around,
over.
Right?
Yeah.
I do think people give off vibes, right? Like, and I don't mean like frequencies and colors and whatever it is. I just think people pick up on things subconsciously, right? Subconscious cues, whatever it is. And so people will pick up instinctually on, I'm going to be a little bit more on guard with you because there's just something implicitly that is triggering my defense mechanism, or I'm going to be a little more relaxed with you because, I just feel a little bit more safe than the need to be guarded. I prefer the latter. And I think, as we were talking before, and kind of one of the things that occurred to me, like underlying all of this, I think it's really about connections. Like I really like genuine connections.
And so that comes to it. You can't have a genuine connection if your motives aren't genuine and how you're approaching that new or existing relationship.
Right.
And so, but even touching on that, you had said, yes, you always had this ability to kind of be aware of others and to assess them almost. But Francois, I believe you said his name was, he really influenced you on checking, well, how are you using that?
Yeah, like he just kind of like called it out in a sense of like, almost like this link to the morality of it, which I think that necessarily wasn't there. And I think part of the reason is too is because, as a kid, I was a super shy kid who, self-conscious. I think partially because I've always been tried to be hyper observant and curious, and that caused me to kind of turtle up a little bit and kind of like see things and then get in my head and stuff. I kind of went to the other extreme, right?
That overcompensation.
Yeah. And so there wasn't this regard, and so it was almost like, on the one hand, being for lack of a better term, the victim of it. So from my point of view, it wasn't about fairness; it was about survival, like emotional, psychological, whatever it was. And then, kind of transitioning through that into, well, now I feel this power, like now I get to be the aggressor, right? And getting a little bit kind of caught up in that this kind of feels whatever. But then it's like, oh wait, this is also destructive, right? And that's I think where it was like, now there's casualties. Now there's ramifications of behaviors and thinking about, and so it started to mature and evolve, since then, and everything's like a bit of a Spector wasn't like a binary thing, but it really was more about, okay, well now if I behave this way, how will somebody else respond? I'm an engineer by training. I think just by nature and by character. And so there is an element of how I think that is almost, block sequential, take data in, if this, then that kind of thing. And so there's an element of this kind of balance of like intellectual, cognitive rationality coupled with gut feeling, right? And so when the two kind of play together, what's resonating? And it's kind of like, if I say this, how would I think this person's going to respond? Well, they might feel this way. Well, I don't want them to feel that way. So like I want to be sensitive to that. So how can I attenuate or position the messaging so they feel safe enough that the message gets across? And I remember early in my career, at Promation, we all went on this training course, like leadership management training type thing, like early on. And one of the only things I remember from that was intent versus impact, right? And it's this thing of like, what the intent was this, but the impact was this. And that's always stuck with me. And I use that even today when talking about somebody getting upset because somebody else had said something, and it's not, it's the what and the how, right? So
I just went through one of those in a personal situation where my intent was so different, but the impact was felt completely, and it destabilized something so truly. And both of us just had to sit down and say, how did you see this? How did I see this? But it's a valuable lesson, and I think one that a lot of people never learn. Or there's this attitude of, well, that's just me being blunt. I'm just a blunt person.
Yeah.
There's a
difference. You're sensitive.
Yeah, like there's a difference between saying something direct and true and still doing it with kindness and respect, as opposed to just being rude and throwing something out there. So that intent versus impact is so important, and a lesson that so many people just skip over.
But I think even to take it a step further, I think it's really about if you don't curate situations or conditions of safety and security, the message won't get through because then you're going to be defensive. And defensive means you're blocked up in your shield and so on. And you think about the basic things around like fight, flight instinct and all that kind of stuff. And there's so many like subconscious, psychological, physiological reactions that we can't control. And so if someone's coming at you aggressively or yelling or whatever it is, you simply can't keep yourself in a receptive space because the way the brain works is going to flood it with certain chemicals and hormones and so on that your brain literally gets hijacked and you just get like psychologically kind of like protected. And so even if you're trying to like give me a message I need to hear, I'm not going to hear it. So how effective are you in conveying that message? And that, like even that goes back to my childhood. Like, I think I would say I had literally like a troubled childhood. Not like we were safe and secure, right? But like emotionally, psychologically, like my parents would argue, and having reflected on it in my early adulthood, trying to navigate through it, I was like, what was it about the situation, right? And I thankfully had the benefit of an engineering type mind that could like see things, break it down, and then deconstruct it and make sense of it. And so having to navigate the reconciliation to myself, like psychologically, of like what happened when I was growing up, why did it happen, and so on. It's not my parents weren't good people; they were very good people as people. But I think they had, like everybody does, and I think, as parents, as you become parents, you figure out, man, being a parent's not easy because, kids can be a handful and all that kind of stuff.
And you're still human.
And you're still human,
It's
right?
such a big lesson to learn that our parents are just human beings
Absolutely.
also trying to figure out life.
But I think that's an evolution that I, like many, like kind of realize is that when you start to see your parents as human beings with faults, it's way easier to forgive them for the way they behaved and have a lot of more grace and gratitude as opposed to contempt and animosity towards their faults. And so when I was able to like start to accept my parents for the honest mistakes they made and so on, but having to navigate through all that, if let's say my dad raised his voice, my mom raised her voice, whether it's frustration or I was being frustrating or behaviors, whatever it was, but what they were saying wasn't coming through. What I was hearing was like, threat. And so I just like turtled up, like stay silent, lose my voice kind of thing, which would like trigger them more because it seemed like I was just like not listening. And so I, just really tried to be sensitive to that because for me, like connection's really key. And so, and sort of like applying all of these kind of learnings in myself and navigating that into the other dynamics that I bring as well. That was an arc in an evolution that didn't happen until after, my adolescence. And then, like I was saying, like there was a part of this, I've got this newfound power, so now I'm going to like exploit it a bit on dudes like, I think his name is Graham. And the fact that I still remember that and still feel a bit remorse 25 years later, like shows that, in the moment it was like, yeah, but like now it's like, it's the wrong type decision in the moment. Because again, behaviors that don't resonate with your own core values are not going to stick. And I think that's really what comes down to is finding that kind of mind-body connection of like, my head's saying this, but does my gut say this is the right way to behave? Because your gut is what's kind of going back to your North Star compass of like, that guides how you engage in every situation, whether it's personal, with other people, at work, with family, whatever it is.
Isn't that funny, the things that we hold on to? Because I think you, myself, listeners, everyone has something that is so far in the past that you think we should be removed from it by now, but it still has the trigger to make us feel a certain way. Like you saying, you still, when you think of Graham in that moment of where you really came down hard on him, he probably doesn't think of it anymore. Like he's probably moved past it. But isn't it so funny that one moment, that one decision you made that really is gone. It is in the past.
For sure.
But it still can evoke those emotions. We all have that. And it's like our gut giving us little nods of that was an important lesson.
Absolutely.
Right? Like that was a moment there. Don't forget that one.
But there's also an element of like, those who are, deny history doomed to repeat it type thing, right? And I think, that Pixar movie came out Inside Out. I think it did such a great job.
Thank you for working Disney into the conversation.
I think it did such a great job of giving a simple, elementary way of understanding feelings. Like those blue feelings, whatever it was, that kind of went into the vault. And that was such a cool way. Yeah, but it was such a cool way. And to your point, like from a time frame point of view, those are irrelevant because they are shaping memories that kind of like calibrate how we navigate ourselves through life. My brother moved out when he was 16, my older brother.
Do you only have the one brother?
Yeah.
You said my older brother, like there was an alternative.
So not a younger brother.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then he basically didn't talk to my dad. Like the two of them like had a lot of friction. My dad moved out when I was 16 and we worked in the same building together. So he was a doctor, on the second floor. I worked in the pharmacy. We worked in the same building, one floor apart for 2.5 years and we never spoke. And even when he like called down to call in a prescription when I was in the pharmacy, oh, hello, it's Dr. Spector. I just hand the phone to the pharmacist and they kind of knew what was going on. And then like when I was 19, because both our birthdays are in December, I called him up and I was like, hey, it's Darryl, your son. We should probably reconcile. He's like, oh, yeah, I think that would probably be appropriate. And so we made plans to like get together.
Just randomly.
Well, it wasn't randomly. I think,
Had you been thinking about it? Because if you hadn't talked for 2.5 years, what triggered now's the time?
Because I had gone through like a self, like trying to rationalize. And I think when I was 16, like any adolescent at 16, life is crazy. Trying to figure out that transition from a kid to I'm an adult, and I've actually got a almost 16-year-old now, and I can see it happening in him, and I have a lot of like compassion for him going through that. So you have to be ready to face things. It doesn't mean you're denying it. It doesn't mean you can't heal, but timing is everything as well. And I think having that time and space to kind of like work through it, I was like at a point that I'm willing to kind of go into that and kind of call out that courage to be like, I'm going to make the call. Because if I wait for it, it's not going to happen. And so called him up, we agreed, met for dinner, and then it was fine. Like everything was cool. It's like that. I overused the quote about Mark Twain, worried about a great many things. Almost everything never came true. Same kind of thing. We always worry about a lot of stuff, right? We kind of like reset the start of a new relationship together. So we started kind of going for dinner and hanging out every weekend. And so we had a ritual that every Sunday I'd go see my dad unless I was doing something else. And so we kind of rebuilt a new connection in my adulthood because now I had seen him as an adult, not as my father. I mean, still as a father, but not as a parent, a faultless parent. So I held him to a more realistic standard. And so we could connect as that.
Were you a father at that point?
No.
Okay.
No.
Still early on.
And then, I also obviously talked to my brother who had moved out and he knew that we were talking, like my dad and I were talking and seeing each other and so on. And I was like,
he hadn't talked to him in
my brother had
years,
not
like
talked to
10
him since he
years,
moved
like-
out.
Yeah.
And so I was like, hey, it's probably time you reconcile with dad. He's like, oh, I know, but I've been dreading this moment for like forever. I was like, you just got to do it. Like, the more you wait, right? And so finally we've kind of facilitated that and kind of played like Switzerland, kind of like, hey, dad, it's time. He's like, oh, yeah, I'd rather enjoy that. And then, my brother and so on. And so I remember picking my brother up from the train station to bring him to my dad's in Oakville. And we went in there and my brother was shaking, like literally shaking. I'm like, what's going on? He's like, I'm probably the most scared I am right now and I have been in my whole life. I'm like, why? He's like, because I've been dreading this moment, but I know it needs to happen. There was so much, and my thought was like, I'd already kind of gone through the journey. So I'd kind of like, navigated all the history. I've already like deconstructed and challenged the what if paradigms, the worst case situation, and reality kind of trumped the what ifs kind of thing. So I was already past it. Whereas my brother had not only a more intense situation, but a longer time for those like what if demons to be playing, as, what is it? Fear is like fake, whatever, acting real or whatever. And so that was his reality that he kind of constructed. And so like all of that was kind of like coming to a head. And then we showed up and everything was fine. And we show up and we get in and, like, it's like time hadn't even passed. It's like he showed up, they hugged, sat down on the couch. Cool.
As Mark Twain said, it usually ends up
100%.
that way. Yeah.
And I said, like, do you guys realize like this is the first time the three of us be in the same room in like 12 years? And it was bonkers how much time had passed from that. It was great to be able to be a part of that. And then actually what's funny is like then my brother and my dad seemed to almost have a closer relationship than my dad and I had built up over those years, like I don't know, 5 or 6 years, whatever afterwards. But what struck me is like, here I am as the younger child, the youngest in the family dynamic. And, it was almost like why, I don't want to say it like in a derogatory sense, but like, why is it falling to me as the youngest child, the youngest one in the family unit, to basically do the parenting?
Yes.
Right? To facilitate this with my older brother, who I looked up to when I was growing up as the authority of the siblings, the responsible one, the one who got to drive first, the one who had the job first, the one who moved out first, all this kind of stuff. And my dad, who was the patriarch of the family, right? So I had to call him to initiate reconciliation with us. And then I had to facilitate all this kind of stuff. But what that taught me was it doesn't really matter what your status is, or what your ranking is in the family status or the social status, whatever it is. If you see a situation that warrants, facilitating reconciliation. When I use the word reconciliation, I'm digressing a bit. I understand, it's very much affiliated with Indigenous, and that's why I'm a big passionate. I think like the concept of reconciliation in general, both Indigenous, in other words, I think such a powerful healing concept.
It serves such a purpose.
100%.
Yeah.
You can do a whole other event just on, how to engage Indigenous reconciliation. Where it came down to is that if you see something, if you have a role to play in it, don't cut yourself off from engaging it because you think, oh, it's not my place. I'm not the parents. I'm not the older sibling. I'm not the boss. I'm not the whatever. You have a bit of a moral obligation, I think, to act on that compelling situation. Obviously tactfully, right? If and again, timing matters. Don't get necessarily caught up in hierarchy.
Like
right?
don't be unwilling to deconstruct what the system already is, or not the system might not be the right
Just
word.
don't get caught up in it.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
it's okay once in a while.
Don't be constrained by it, I
It doesn't
guess.
matter that you are the youngest in the family. I think we've all had moments where we felt we've parented our parents. I know I I certainly have, and it's natural because, again,
My kids do
they're-
now, and they're still young.
I love that you recognize it.
Oh, totally.
But I like it. I mean, because again, they're humans just like everyone else. And
Yeah.
I think sometimes we have that misconception even in the workforce where, well, what could I say to my boss? They have all their shit together, for a lack of a better word. Or
Yeah.
these CEOs, we put them on a pedestal and think they have it all figured out. When in fact, they also, just like our parents, are humans who
Yeah.
maybe don't have everything figured out and at times need that prompting or need that support or need that feedback. And it's the lesson I'm hearing from you is that sometimes, yes, you have to deconstruct the formal structure or what should be taking place, top-down leadership or wherever that shows up, and just do what feels right in that moment and what is right in that moment. Or is what is necessary.
I'm not saying like deconstruct it in the sense of like, take down the
No, of
regime
course
kind
not.
of thing.
No.
I think you need to respect the hierarchies and so on.
Yes.
What I'm saying is don't be so blindly bound by them that it constricts you acting on your impulses. As long as you're not like insubordinate. Like if someone's saying you need to do this assignment for this deadline, you've got these deliverables and these targets. Well, I disagree with you. And
Yeah,
here's
that's
why.
not what we're telling people to do. Please, listeners.
Do those things.
We're going to disrupt the industry. I knew it wouldn't take long before this went off the rails and we caused some chaos.
I think what it is as a society, we put in constructs of how people need to engage. That's that's the fundamental basis of a functioning society. If you don't have anarchy. That's one piece to it, acknowledging that exists. In conjunction with that, we are also living human beings, organic, faulty animals and people that need to engage with each other as well. So, you plan the work, you work the plan, all that kind of stuff. The structure, the hierarchy is the plan. But how we navigate through that and the nuances and dynamics and the Murphy's law of chaos and everything else, the how you navigate it. So not the what, but so much the how you navigate it. That's where the nuances come in. When I talk to younger professionals or young adults getting to what's the advice and so on mentoring is like when you engage with somebody senior, especially early on in your career, don't get necessarily caught up in the position of the person. If I'm meeting with somebody in a position of authority and I'm all of a sudden just kind of just being naturally deferential to them, oh sir, or oh ma'am, whatever it is, I'm forcing them now to react to me in a subordinate, superior type demeanor.
The mirrored.
Yeah. And so I haven't even given them a chance to connect with me as a human being because now I've already forced the situation of dynamic for them to now treat me as a superior because now I'm already kind of coming at them with my tail down and whatever. Whereas what I've learned through these kind of things is I'm going to acknowledge and respect your position. I'm going to respect the fact that you are in a position of leadership, that you've done things to get to this point. I acknowledge and respect that. But I'm going to engage with you as a human being. And when you do that, when you kind of acknowledge that, but then also engage with them as a human being, you're now giving them permission to now be themselves. You're giving them license to say, you don't need to now engage with me as a superior and put on this social construct that you feel that you now need to bring to this engagement. You can now engage with you as a human being. And I'm not going to say as a peer, but as a peer as a human being, as a peer that has values and feelings and beliefs and respect that we should engage each other as human equals while respecting our difference in the social construct of, whatever engagement or work or hierarchy and so on. And if you look at really effective leaders and CEOs, they're so good at building genuine relationships and connections and partnerships and so on because they do that, right? When people engage with other ones, unless they're leading through really autocratic fear, which is not really sustainable, they are able to build scale and develop high functioning teams that are high trust and all that kind of stuff. And it's because people feel, at the end of the day, it comes back to people feeling safe, people feeling trusted and feeling like they've got, the other person has their best interests for them. And when you do that, you create an environment that allows people to flourish and thrive.
I love that. And it's also true. People don't want to lead someone that they don't really feel akin to. And so if we're always approaching people from the bowed down perspective, number one, it must get tiring, I would think, for those people who are
and it can be lonely.
Consistently so lonely. And also
they say it's lonely at the top, and there's a reason why people say that, right?
And I would also think it doesn't help anything with their leadership. Like my thought would be, to be really blunt, the more people treat you like that, the more it must go to your head. The more it must be very hard to check yourself, to take feedback. And I think that's where we get really ego-driven leadership is when that is their existence, right? And I know there's other paths that kind of bring to that, but it's
But
got
we've
to be
both seen
lonely
it.
on the other side.
I think we've both seen when people who were, I would say, in a career and they rose to a position of authority because they've been there the longest, not because they're necessarily the best leader. And for whatever reason, they're no longer with that company and they've struggled to find something new. And it's because there's a dissonance between what they think they're entitled to because of how they were engaged or treated or positioned, whatever it was, versus, their ability to actually curate those really meaningful connections and really deliver value or whatever it is. And that's why you can't just kind of like rely on status. And to your point, if you're relying on title and status, how sustainable is it? Because again, those are constructs. They're not about people being people and genuine connections.
And would you say it's also, I know this to be true of Promation, it is a culture that people come back to and that are welcomed back to. Do you think that comes from your leadership moving down through the company and the fact that, the door isn't open, that reconciliation is always available? And I'm not saying reconciliation in a bad way, because sometimes people leave just to go explore, to fill
absolutely.
gaps. But you have had multiple people come back and continue to flourish in their careers at Promation.
Yeah. I know companies, I've heard of companies where it's like if you give your notice, even though you've been there 20 years and you have to give like 4 weeks notice, I've heard like where the owner, if he finds out, or the CEO or whatever, if he finds out that you get notice, he'll literally walk up, say, get your stuff and get out. And he doesn't use the word stuff. And it could be like that afternoon or the next day. And the rest of the staff is like, we need to transition. Like, I don't care. If they're not going to be loyal to me, they're dead to me. Get out.
They take it so personally. I've been in a situation like that where I heard nothing from them. It was like
they feel like it's a betrayal of like loyalty or something.
Yeah.
When somebody chooses to leave an organization, they're doing it for whatever reasons they feel is right for them at the time, in the context, in that moment. Promation's not perfect like any other company, but I think we're on the right track. But when people have left us and they give their reasons, whether they're truthful to us or not, but to the extent they are, it's like, listen, in your situation, I don't necessarily follow you. I'd rather you stay or whatever, but like, I understand, go in peace kind of thing. You want people to still be able to maintain integrity. It's not easy for most people. It's not easy for people to resign, right? I'm not saying like I want to make it easy, but at the same time too, you want people to be able to maintain a degree of integrity in that engagement. And the fact is, some of the folks that have left have become allies in other companies and customers and so on. But at the same time too, it's like for younger people in their career, they do need to see the grass might be greener. Or for other people, it's like, listen, it's not working for me right now at this time, whatever. But you still stay in contact. And then, we've had, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 people come back in the past year and a half, and they've been around. And I think they've seen a combination of factors where, we're all growing, we've all evolved and so on. But I think what it comes down to is, at this point in my career, I'm not necessarily looking for more profile or more, whatever. It's like, I want to feel good about the work that I do. I want to feel, work environment, values, all that kind of stuff. And I want to be excited about coming to work every day. I want to feel respected. I want to be in an environment where I feel inspired and so on. And those things start to become, those intangibles start to become more important in their satisfaction of what do I actually want out of an opportunity in a career. And again, it's not like they reached out saying, hey, can I have my job back? It was like, it was like a tenuous note on LinkedIn that I hadn't heard from somebody in like 8 years. Like, hey, can I get a reference from you? I'm like, why? What's going on? Well, I'm thinking about doing something else. I'm like, well, what? They're like, well, blah, blah, blah. I was like, well, you could do that with us, I think, because where we're at. And he's like, really? I thought I couldn't come back. He's like, why would you think that? He's like, oh, I just thought the bridge was burned. Like, but no, like you did great work at the time. You're a good person. Where we are now versus what, your career and so on, timing is everything, right? So happy to have you back. And what I find is that those people, because they have willingly come back and they've acknowledged, I kind of knew, I know what I'm coming back to a certain extent, plus whatever has changed since, they're generally more invested. So.
Because there's the flip side of it of if that door wasn't open for them to come back, there's talent you would be losing.
100%.
Yeah.
Talent, mentorship, experience. And we've had people join us who've said, hey, like one of the reasons I'm coming here and not X is because so-and-so and so-and-so who I know came back, and that says something to me. Like if this person who I know, who I respect, is coming back to this company, it says something about them and their choice to come back, and it also says something about you guys as a company and a culture that is willing to accept them back as well.
It's funny you mentioned someone there about when people leave us in one company, they're going to show up probably not too far from our proximity just because of the way our industry. It's so true of nuclear that your friends are never far away.
Yeah.
And same as your foes.
Yeah.
And that works both ways. If you leave a bad taste in someone's mouth who has decided to leave you for whatever reason, if you take it personal, and on the flip side, if they leave a bad taste in your mouth, they're not going far in the industry usually, and that gets around. So even how you treat one another, whether you have an intention of coming back, is so important. And again, it's that intent over impact.
But it's also
and how it
integrity.
plays out.
I think, to your point, it's normal, very natural part of the process. You ask for references, both formally and informally. When an employee leaves a company, they're going to give you the references they want to give you. But to your point, the industry can be small. And so you'll get these informal phone calls. Hey, this guy just applied or this woman just applied. What do you think? And if they said something, but if, they're calling myself that we've got a relationship and connection and they trust me and there's integrity, my feedback can hold more relevancy in their consideration than what this person is telling them because they're biased because they want the job, right? So again, another reason to leave on good terms because at some point you're also going to need the reference as well. And if somebody leaves us for reasons that they think or they feel are the right reasons, and they call me for reference, I will give them a very strong reference if I believe it's legitimate and sound. Because again, it goes back to being a good person, and either I can exploit the situation to my benefit and be like, oh, they're terrible, but they might be an amazing employee. They might be an amazing employee that'll make that other company so good. And if I'm like, oh, they're terrible, they're going to sabotage you and so on. Let's say they take a risk on that person, they hire them, and they're like, this person's amazing. So the equation's not adding up. So either there's something with your company that's not a fit, or something about you that you're not seeing their talent or you're feeling threatened. At the end of the day, it's going to come out. The math and the equation, the engineering mindset, it's not a binary thing in some cases. It's always going to come out. So why not just do the right thing in the first place?
As we kind of move forward, and I'm going to pivot a little bit here, still talking about connections and with others and all those things, you also are someone who is known as a major ally in this industry for, Indigenous that we've already touched upon, for women in nuclear, and making this a space where everyone feels welcome and everyone's capabilities are appreciated. How important is that for you, knowing where this industry is moving towards? How important is it for you that you're showing up in those spaces and making maybe some historically forgotten about segments of our workforce feel more included, more heard, more seen, more capable, more confident?
I wouldn't say it's intentional in the sense of I'm going to behave this way to achieve this outcome, to get these optics, to do this thing. And I'm super grateful for the Ally of the Year award and extremely surprised.
Yeah, so 2025, Women in Nuclear named you their Ally of the Year. And I'm going to push back a little bit because I know you say it's not intentional, but there's something in you that knows it needs to be done, and you do intentionally do it. Because a lot of people aren't not allies,
right.
But they do not show up in the way that you do. So there has to be some sort of intention of.
But what I mean by intentional is it's not intentional
for what you get out of it.
It's not like I'm going to do this thing, so I solicit these responses and accolades.
It's not performative.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's intentional because it aligns and resonates with my own values. For those that know me, I've got a very broad network, and I like connecting people, like dissonant connections. And it goes back to that engineering mindset, whether it's as a kid building Lego or now as we build automated machinery and all that kind of stuff. I like building things. It's innately in me as an engineer. And so if I connect with somebody who says, I am trying to do this or I have this, I'm like, oh, I know somebody you should talk to, right? And I like connecting because whether you're connecting people in networks or building a machine or building Lego, it's still bringing individual pieces together in a unique way. And that's fun. I get a buzz of that. It's just kind of what gets me going. That's, I think, one piece to it is the building piece. The other thing is I also just like helping friends. It's a good feeling to help friends out. There's gratitude, there's whatever. And those kind of common, shared positive vibes and connections and so on. And it's funny because I've introduced somebody to the nuke industry from a non-nuke adjacent industry. And I've made these connections, and it's done well for him and well for the connections I made to him as well. And what was funny is that, he was saying to me a couple of months ago, he's like, you actually follow through. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, you say you're going to connect me with so-and-so, and you actually do it, but you don't just make the connection. You make the connection and give the context and leverage your own kind of relationship and credibility and so on, and you really do it. I'm like, and I don't see I don't see another way of engaging. Like it's kind of like inherently, logically what makes sense because it's what resonates, that gut feeling in the core that doing this satisfies both my desire to build things, right? Like to fulfill that element of whatever, but also it's like, I want to help a friend. Right, you get that endorphin hit of like doing good feels good. It's like petting a dog or something, oxytocin, whatever. And if I can help you out, it's great. And so he's like, you actually follow through and meeting through it, and not a lot of people do that. And that's what I find. Like, why would you not? Like, I still don't understand. Like, why would you not make the effort? I feel bad when I meet somebody and like, hey, blah blah, or hey, can you help my son with this, or can you connect with this, and so on. And I mean to, and I get an email and I forget to follow up. And like months later, I'm like, oh man, I forgot to do that. I feel bad about it because the intent was always there. It's just bandwidth kind of thing. It is intentional, but it's intentional because manifesting in that way resonates with my own personal values. And so when you don't do that, when you're not acting in alignment with what resonates and aligns with your own personal values, you're out of joint, you're out of sequence. And again, using the engineering analogy, it's like a machine or an engine that's out of timing or out of calibration. It'll get you there, but it'll be a clunky, painful ride. Like I'd rather it be smooth and in harmony and optimized performance, all kind of stuff. And so when you're using your own compass of that's kind of gut checking, my thought says this, but does my gut say this too? And those are in alignment. It's this concept of flow, right? Like where you're just, when you have that harmony between you're pursuing something, you're just kind of humming along, it takes less effort. And I mean, at the end of the day, I'm a kind of a lazy guy in the sense that I don't want to put more effort into something than it needs if there's a more efficient way of doing it. Right?
I was going to say, it's not lazy, it's efficiency. Well,
yeah,
effectiveness and efficiency.
Yeah. So like my brother,
we'll market it up.
My brother who's a lawyer, my dad was a doctor, a lot of study involved in that, right? A lot of reading, a lot of memorization, a lot of writing. I'm an engineer. And one of the reasons is because what I like about engineering is that you can kind of break things down to first principles, find equations, and then build it back up. You can figure things out based on the inputs. Yeah, you need to study a lot, but it's not like you're reading volumes and volumes of case studies or like encyclopedic knowledge of the human body and anatomy, right? It's more based on reasoning, and you have that both in medicine and in law as well. But my buddy's dad used to work at investment, like private equity investment type stuff. And I remember in high school, he's like, oh, what are you going to go to university for? Engineering. He's like, when you graduate, let me know. I was like, but why? I'm not a finance business guy. I'm going to be an engineer. He's like, half my employees are engineers. I'm like, why? He's like, because engineering teaches you to think in a unique way. And I can tell you that some of my most successful financial advisors have an engineering background because it's teaching you to think in a unique way. And I think that's kind of what it comes down to is, how you engage and break things down in that mind-body connection. So it's like, I say this joke is like, how do you tell the difference between an introverted engineer and an extroverted engineer? Well, the introverted engineer looks at his feet when he talks to you, and the extroverted engineer looks at your feet when he talks to you, right? And I think that's kind of the thing is like, being in this industry, being in nuclear, there's a lot of like technical people and so on. Don't get caught up in your head. Don't lose touch of that kind of like the gut resonance, guiding North Star compass. Because if you think just because you're right, and I can say, hey, the math says this, you're wrong. This is right. And you're engaging that way. Just because you're right, because the calculation and the equation says you are, doesn't give you license to then use that to, frankly, attack the other person, undermine them, shame them, whatever it is. In the same way that it wasn't any better for me to like go after, Graham when I was an intern at GE and Francois called me out.
We're going to have to tag Graham on this.
Yeah. I don't even know where he is now.
A reunion, bring you two together and really.
Yeah. He's like, you ruined my life. Do you remember that time?
Yeah. Where is Graham now? That'll be the next special segment.
Yeah. I think, but like, from one of the takeaways from this one, I think it really is about, I've been seeing it more and more in the companies, like, what's the kind of the guiding principle is like, be a good person, do good things. Everything's a derivative of that, right? And it's the same kind of thing as just, it's really that, just be a good person, do good things. And like, don't don't deny the mind-body connection to like your gut versus like what you see and observe and think is right. And again, it kind of ties back to that authority type structure thing. Is that I've said to the younger folks as well, is like when you don't speak up to your voice, like in that kind of thing, in a respectful way, you're also denying me the benefit of that input and the opportunity to like course correct myself and to get another data point that allows me to calibrate and grow and evolve, because you have a unique perspective from your position as a young professional, young adult. And if all I'm hearing is, kind of the yes men type thing, I can't grow and evolve, which I want to do. I mean, that's what makes life interesting, right? Continuous learning and all that kind of stuff, and humility and whatever else. And so that's the one piece of it. But on the other side, there is also an obligation or responsibility for folks like in my position and the other people you have on the podcast to also be receptive to it. I mean, if they're not receptive to it, they're just going to shut it down saying, who are you to speak to me that way, right? So it needs to be mutual as well. But again, that goes back to acknowledging positions and authority and seniority and so on respectfully, but then engaging mutually as human peers.
That's right. It's not forgetting that at the end of the day, we are all just humans figuring out
Worthy
this
of
life.
respect, yeah.
And so we're wrapping up here. That's flown by. I love the energy you bring to the conversations. One last thing. When we think of nuclear, what excites you right now? What do you think people should be excited about within our industry?
There's a lot going on. And it's not, I think the difference is now, whereas before it might have been one thing. So back in the early days, it was a new build. Huge thing. Okay, well now it's refurb. Okay. Well now there's the refurb going on at a scale that's never gone on before in refurbishing reactors. There's the small modular reactors being built, in Darlington and, around the world. So SMRs. And there's also the talk of large-scale new builds for the first time in years domestically. I mean, they're building, over in China and so on, but like really talking about new builds in Ontario and Canada and through the U.S. and so on. So that's huge and new. But then there's also the derivative things around radiopharma and medical isotopes and all those things, and that's becoming even a bigger thing. And that's a huge area for us. Like, there's just those derivative evolutions on multi lines of opportunities at the same time is super exciting. So it's not just like you can get, they always say about, you don't want to be exposed to one industry and be exposed like in just automotive or just nuclear, because if there's cycles, you get shocks and whatnot. But there's you can also get like diversification just within the nuclear industry. That's the one piece to it. The other thing is we're talking about like massive long cycles. Like it's not just 18 months or 2 years, like literally decades and decades of work down the road. That's almost generational. So if you look at, you refurbish or you build a reactor, which takes, 5 to 10 years. And then it operates for 30 years. And then you're refurbishing for another 5 years. And then it runs again. And then there's another refurbishment potentially. They're talking about second generation refurbishment. And so my grandkids could be working on the same things that I'm touching today. Like where else do you have that? And from my point of view, again, I like the fact that I'm able to have a role in curating an environment for a company that can create rewarding jobs for people that they can feel secure about, that they can feel that I've got a job that I enjoy, that brings me a sense of satisfaction, fulfillment, that also allows me as a caregiver for my family to provide for my family with safety, security, and confidence, and to facilitate that. But that's because of everything going on in nuclear now. And so if we grow as a company, that just means, because of the industry growth, that means I can help more people find that sense of security and value and fulfillment as a caregiver to their own families. And how amazing is that?
I love the fact that with our industry, as you said, the opportunity is there, the diversity. We don't have to be engineers. I am not an engineer. I'm not a technology-driven person. But here I am loving and thriving in the nuclear sector. There's so many jobs that are required in this that not only is the length of opportunity there, the stability of opportunity, but also the diversity of what you can do and what you can contribute to from so many different perspectives within nuclear. It's one of the things I love the most that I wish more people knew about, because if you want a career, if you want to make a difference, if you want to be combating some of the most challenging things facing societies today, this industry is a really good place to start looking.
But even to take it a step further, I think
Yeah.
if you like learning and evolving and being curious and being hungry, you can build an entire career to the point where like you can right to the end of your retirement still keep discovering and learning and evolving within the broader nuclear industry, because there are so many different avenues and roads to pursue within those things. And so, it's really possible to stay continually engaged and excited about what you can discover just for yourself.
And we look at someone like Tracy Primo, even, who she is going to be a couple episodes, I can't remember, on our release schedule after our conversation, how many times she has reinvented her career and found new paths and been working on different things. Like you said, yeah, you can reinvent yourself in this career, and there's such a long runway for what you can get out of the sector without limiting yourself or thinking I have to do one thing for the rest of my life. There is just so much opportunity here. So I'm in agreement with you. I think it's an exciting thing.
Absolutely.
And the hour has gone by, but thank you so much. I appreciate you coming down, being in the Splitting Atoms podcast
And honestly,
studio.
thank you for the invite. I really appreciate the opportunity. And again, kind of humbled to be amongst the other colleagues and peers that you have on the series as well. So
Don't worry,
you.
I'm soon. One day I'll run out and it will just be me and my cats having conversations.
I'll tune in for it.
Perfect. No,
Literally
thank you.
perfect.
You would, Darryl.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for splitting atoms with me today, Darryl.
Love it. Thanks.